Hello everyone, welcome to Animation Made Easy with Obijive Empire. I'm Andre, your guide through this world of endless creative possibilities. In this episode, I'll walk you through how I created the Rema animated music video. Due to copyright issues, I won't be playing the song here, but if you haven't seen the video yet, there's a link in the top right corner. Go check it out, then come back to follow along. For those who've already seen it, let's jump right in. After the animation blew up on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, I got a ton of messages asking me to explain how it was done, so I thought, why not make a tutorial series to cover everything? In this session, we'll focus on a particular scene, the baseball sequence, because it's simple enough for beginners to grasp, but still covers the essentials. Feel free to follow along if you have the tools for animation. Before we proceed, let's talk about the tools I used to create this masterpiece. For the animation, I used Adobe Animate. For the composition and final touches, I used After Effects. As for hardware, I worked with a digital tablet and a laptop. If you're interested in learning more about my setup, I'll cover that in a separate video. If you're following along, you can even use your phone with Flipaclip. The key is understanding the fundamentals, and you're good to go. Now let's jump into Adobe Animate. For this sequence, I'll be animating at 24 frames per second, with a screen resolution of 1920 by 1080. But before we start, let's take a moment to talk about how animation works. Let's visit Tyler Pacana's channel for a visual representation. Animation works by creating the illusion of movement through the rapid display of a sequence of images or frames. Each frame represents a snapshot of a moment in time, and when these frames are shown quickly in succession, our brains perceive them as continuous motion. In traditional animation, each frame is drawn by hand, first with rough sketches, then with clean lines and colors. Back in the day, it was first done on paper. An artist could flip through drawings to see the motion. But now, they draw on computer tablets with a digital pen. For more about this, visit Tyler's channel. For this animation, I used traditional animation, which means every frame was drawn by hand, one by one, to create the final sequence. Although I didn't record the actual animation process, in this video we'll be animating the scene from scratch. There are two fundamental approaches to frame-by-frame animation. 1. Straight-ahead animation. Straight-ahead animation involves drawing each frame in sequence, from start to finish. This approach often creates more fluid and spontaneous motion. Think of it as building a film frame by frame, where each drawing naturally progresses from the previous one. This method is particularly effective for scenes with a lot of action or unpredictable movement, like animating water or hair, exactly what we'll use when animating Rema's hair. For the body motion, we'll be using the second approach, pose-to-pose animation. This method involves creating key poses or main positions first, called keyframes, and then filling in the in-between frames. Pose-to-pose animation is ideal for more controlled and precise animation. It's like setting up important checkpoints in your animation and then connecting them with intermediate frames. By combining both methods, we'll achieve a dynamic yet controlled animation in this project. With this in mind, let's start by drawing the first two frames, the first and last frames. When drawing your first pass, keep your drawings loose. The focus should be on getting the gestures right and ensuring the animation moves the way it should. After that, you can start adding details. Though in this video, I went straight to the second pass because this is my second time drawing this scene, and I already have a feel for what I want. This approach isn't advisable for beginners, as it can make your animation a bit rigid. After you're done with the first and last frames, we move to the anticipation or breakdown. This is where the character anticipates their movement, like pulling back a hand before landing a punch. In this pose, we'll draw the character pulling backward before hitting the skull in the next scene. After that, we draw the in-betweens. I'll make a separate video on how to in-between properly. To make this process more accurate and efficient, you can use a tool called Onion Skin in Adobe Animate. This will allow you to see ghost images of the frames before and after your current frame as semi-transparent overlays. This feature is similar to traditional animation's tracing paper technique, where you layer drawings on top of each other to ensure continuity. Draw the in-between frame by positioning the character or object midway between the keyframes. Focus on keeping the motion fluid and natural, ensuring that each frame logically follows the previous one. Pay attention to movement arcs as you work. Natural motion tends to follow curved paths, so make sure your in-between frames maintain these arcs to avoid stiff or unnatural movements. After you've drawn your in-betweens, preview the animation to check for any issues. If the motion seems off, you can easily adjust the in-between frames by moving elements slightly or refining the timing. Once you're satisfied, check the overall flow to ensure the animation transitions smoothly from one keyframe to the next. If needed, add or remove frames to achieve the desired timing. Looks good. Next, we move on to the third pass, clean lines. To do this, reduce the opacity of the rough sketch and draw over it, following the same process as before. Start by tracing the keyframes first, ensuring they are sharp and precise. These keyframes are the most critical moments in your animation, so they should be as clean as possible. Once the keyframes are done, move on to the breakdowns, and finally, tackle the in-betweens. Maintaining the same level of care and attention to detail throughout each stage helps keep the animation fluid and consistent. Your goal here is to refine your rough work and bring clarity to your animation. When drawing clean lines, focus on making smooth, confident strokes. It's important to avoid sketchy or shaky lines, as these can detract from the overall quality of your animation. If you find it challenging to get smooth lines, consider zooming in on your canvas. This gives you better control over your strokes, allowing you to make each line as precise as possible. Maintaining consistency in line thickness is another essential aspect of clean line work. Uniform line weight helps create a cohesive look across your animation. However, you can also play with line thickness to emphasize certain areas or add depth to your characters or objects. For instance, thicker lines can be used to highlight foreground elements, while thinner lines can recede into the background. While your rough sketch serves as a foundation, remember that it's just a guide. Don't hesitate to make adjustments as you refine your work. Clean lines should enhance the shapes and forms in your animation, giving them a more polished appearance. This is where you can add subtle details or correct any proportions that didn't quite translate in the rough pass. After you've completed your clean lines, take the time to carefully review your work. Look for any gaps, unevenness, or inconsistencies in your lines. This is your last chance to make any corrections before you move on to coloring or additional detailing. Clean lines are what give your animation a professional edge, so it's worth the extra effort to perfect them. By following these steps and taking your time, you'll create clean, polished lines that enhance the overall quality of your animation. The final result will be more cohesive, visually appealing, and ready for the next stages of production. Looks good. Now that we've covered the basics of animating this scene, it's time to wrap up. I hope you found this breakdown helpful, especially if you're just getting started with animation. Remember, practice makes perfect, and the more you experiment with these techniques, the better you'll become. In the next episode, we'll dive into how Rema's head and hair were animated using the straight-ahead technique. We'll also cover how to add color, shadows, and the background to bring the entire scene to life. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated with future episodes. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next episode of Animation Made Easy with Obijive Empire.